Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on protecting foster youth from human trafficking. Today, we commemorate World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, which was established by the United Nations General Assembly in 2013, and this day aims to raise global awareness, protect victims' rights, and stop the crime of human trafficking. So what better day to have our three esteemed guests join us on this very pervasive issue that we often sometimes hear about in the trafficking world, with the amount of foster youth that are trafficked every day in our country. And we're going to explore how we can help prevent that and how it happens, and just some of the ways we can identify that and so forth. So my name is Christine Commerce. I am the program director for the Alliance to End Human Trafficking. We are a survivor-informed organization that works to end this atrocity by providing educational resources, giving presentations, raising awareness, and engaging in advocacy across the nation. We also support survivors of human trafficking and healing and thriving through financial support of our member houses and providing educational scholarships. So the purpose of our webinars are to educate people so they can leave with actionable ways to help identify victims and safeguard our communities and its members. So our webinars are always free, but we do appreciate donations. If you'd like to learn more about how you can support our organization, you can visit alliance2endhumantrafficking.org. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and it will be shared. It will also be posted on our YouTube channel, where you can find our past webinars on many other topics surrounding human trafficking. So we will have some time at the end to answer any questions that our guests may have that you guys can put in the Q&A. And with that, please join me in welcoming our guests. First, I'd like to introduce Daniela Dees. She is a trauma-informed professional, survivor leader, and subject matter expert on commercial sexual exploitation and juvenile justice system reform. Drawing from her lived experience as a survivor of commercial sexual exploitation of children and formerly incarcerated youth, Daniela brings both personal and professional expertise to her work advancing survivor-centered systems of care. She also serves as a strategic advisor for the U.S. Department of Justice, Office for Victims of Crime, Human Trafficking Collective, and is the founder of Survivors Hope, a survivor-led, community-based nonprofit in South Florida dedicated to healing, mentorship, and advocacy for at-promise girls and youth impacted by commercial sexual exploitation and involvement in delinquency systems. Next, we have Savannah Parvu. Savannah has a passion for writing and speaking about the hope that she has found after many years of abuse. She routinely shares her experiences with the public to grow knowledge of the tragic issue familial trafficking within the commercial sexual trafficking arena, as well as the foster care system. And she is a nationally recognized speaker and has become one of the foremost voices on human trafficking at the state capitol. And in 2019, Savannah was appointed by then Attorney General Ashley Moody to the board of directors for the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking. No affiliation, but very good work that they do as well. And then last but not least, we have Lisa Shalou. So she has earned her bachelor's degree in child and family studies and her master of public administration. As a former foster youth, she brings both lived and professional experience to her work. For more than a decade, she has worked across child welfare, education, government, and anti-trafficking, building partnerships and strengthening systems to better support youth, families, and communities. Outside of work, she enjoys spending time with her dogs, cats, and chickens. So thank you all for joining us today. Before I lead us into some Q&A, I would like to go ahead and give each of you just a few minutes to go ahead and share a little bit about who you are, the work you do, any experiences you'd like to share, and we'll go ahead and start off with Daniela.
Hi, everybody. I believe the way how you read my bio, I'm like, oh, I don't think I could have done a better job. But hi, everyone. My name is Daniela. I'm located in sunny South Florida. Hello, everyone. A little bit about me. So, what brings me into this movement is my lived experience as someone who was in the criminal justice system, started at a very young age, and while I was in that system, I was also trafficked. So, I have been through varied systems. With exclusion of dependency. However, while I was in the juvenile justice system, I had some connections with youth that were in dependency, and sometimes kids who are in dependency, which is kids who are in foster care, um, disproportionately are affected and are in juvenile justice systems as well. So since I was removed from the life and moved on and got a degree, working on a master's now, um, I decided to return back to those same areas that I was in as a child, same systems, and be able to offer a chance of hope, an example of hope and what it looks like after surviving and thriving past trafficking and being in the juvenile justice system, for at a very young age and eventually aged out of the juvenile justice system, getting close to being a young adult. And I use my lived experiences, my professional experiences, learning from the youth. I've come in contact with youth who are in dependency, and through them, I receive so much education. So my professionalism is really due to the youth that are in these systems and that see me as a safe space to talk to and to educate in regards to how does trafficking look like for a dependency kid who's also in delinquency as well. So since then, I have just been advocating for kids who are in delinquency. And when I have moments to advocate for kids who are in dependency as well, that advocacy is just as strong. Because when I take a step for kids who are in DJJ, I take a step for kids who from all backgrounds, who've experienced all different types of things. So not just kids who are community, but kids who are in dependency as well, who have been in the same systems that community kids have been in as well. So since then, that's been really my advocacy, fighting for youth, educating individuals when it comes to youth who are trafficked. And so that's enough about me. We'll learn more about me, and you'll be able to get to see that passion in this webinar. So who am I passing the baton to next, Christine?
Yes, Savannah Parvu.
Hello, my name is Savannah Parview, and I am a survivor of familial trafficking. I grew up in Central Florida with parents who were both drug addicts and alcoholics. And I remember from an early age, I was told not to talk about things that happened at home. Um, I ended up being trafficked by my mother at the age of 11, and that continued on a consistent basis for a few years until I was placed in foster care at the age of 13. When I went to foster care, I started cutting myself because I watched both of my parents try to commit suicide, and I wanted to know what it felt like when they cut their wrist. And so I cut myself, and it became like an addiction for me. Every time I got upset or angry, I would cut myself, and it would help numb the emotional pain. And so it was became a coping mechanism for me, but it wasn't common at the time. So everybody thought I was trying to commit suicide. And um, so I was moved from group home to group home because I was told they didn't deal with kids like me. I was eventually placed in a residential treatment center that was also a foster group home. Um, and when I got there, I eventually found out that the some of the staff there were friends with my mom's drug dealer, who was my trafficker. So I continued to be trafficked while I was in foster care. And so it was a vicious cycle where I I was where I was supposed to be getting being protected, but I continued to be exploited. Um, Eventually my oldest brother got custody of me, but I remained a ward of the state until I was 18. Um, and eventually got the help that I needed as I was an adult, and now help share my story, to help raise awareness and bring about change, to help put things in place that could have helped me while I was being trafficked and that can help others. I do a lot of work with getting different legislation passed in Florida and that type of stuff. And so I'm excited to be part of this conversation today and help bring my perspective and the things that I've learned over the years.
Thank you so much, Savannah, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I'm sure you'll have a lot more to share with us on how we can help address some of these issues. So next, I'd like to go ahead and hand it over to Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Savannah, thank you for sharing your story. Daniela, appreciate you. It's an honor to be here with all of you today. Um, I guess, what do I want to add to my bio? Um, I I was born into trafficking, so I'm intergenerational exploitation, intergenerational foster care, and intergenerational criminal justice system involvement. Um, so there could be, I don't think we have enough time on this webinar to unpack everything. So I will just say that excited to be here and learn from all of you and see how this goes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into the Q&A. We have so many great questions to cover, and then we'll allow some time at the end for our audience to also ask questions as well. So first, I'd like to begin with, what are some of the myths or misconceptions that exist about trafficking among foster youth? Who would like to take that one first?
I would say one of them is that youth in foster care get trafficked when they run away. I hear that one a lot, and that's not always the case. Normally trafficking is happening before that, and oftentimes before they even go into foster care. But one thing from my situation that I remember is whenever I like some of there were a few of the staff at the group home facility that I was at that were part of the trafficking of me. And when they worked, if I didn't get back to the facility in time, they would tell the next shift that I ran away. And so I was marked as a runaway until I was brought back, even though they were part of it. And so but most of the time when youth run away, that's not when they're trafficked. And I do hear that a lot.
Thank you for sharing that. Lisa or Daniela, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I actually was going in the same direction that Savannah was taking when it comes to youth who are in foster care, that the trafficking happens. Then when it comes to trauma, when it comes to trafficking, trafficking is I see it as the outcome of unmet needs. So, or exposure to poverty, exposure to domestic violence, child abuse, sexual abuse, all of the ACEs. And for those of you who don't know what the ACEs are, I literally just lost my train of thought. Adverse childhood experiences. And so youth who are trafficked, or it comes out that they're trafficked while they're in care, that trauma happens way before. So the thought is, what exactly can systems do? Systems that take in these kids who've already experienced trauma, uprooting them from, and that's causing more trauma. What is it that systems can do to really support these kids while, they are a ward of the state, while the state is their parents? What is something that the state can do to better help that transition for kids who are placed in foster care? So that is a misconception. When it comes to high risk and HT kids, a misconception from others is that, well, they're in foster care, so their case manager takes care of everything. If the common person had the knowledge of what youth who are in foster care receive on a monthly basis, we know kids are expensive. Okay, I have two. All right. They are very expensive. And sometimes those allowances, and most times, those allowances is not enough to take care of the child. It's not enough. And so it places them in a greater risk of exploitation and vulnerability. So going back to Savannah's answer, which I completely agree with, is that the trafficking happens while they're in foster care, when we're missing that a crucial piece to this, which is the trauma, the re-victimization, all of that happens prior. It's just when they get into care, due to so many other, challenges when it comes to kids in care, it creates more of that vulnerability and more of that access.
Thank you. Lisa, would you like to add something? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Savannah and Daniela. All really good points. I think some myths that do continue often is I still hear often, right, that the youth is not being trafficked, that they're just fast, that they're making these decisions, these choices. They need to be punished. They can't be with other people. Oftentimes, if youth have been identified as a victim of trafficking within foster care, they're prevented from going to a lot of homes in fear that the youth is a recruiter, when in reality, that 13-year-old is being trafficked by a 40-year-old, right? They're not recruiting anybody. They're still a trafficker coordinating everything. I think, and Daniela and Savannah, you brought this up within foster care. I think a lot of times youth enter foster care because of the abuse and the trauma. It is really hard to be removed. So if you are removed, there was substantial proof and evidence that there was abuse occurring. And I think a lot of times when people think that they remove the child, that's it, they've been saved. And we'll go into, and Savannah, thank you for sharing a group home experience where often you can be re-trafficked within foster homes. Youth are often re-trafficked. We have to think about as a whole when we think about like perpetrators or people that want to hurt children, they tend to go to where children are. And foster care is a lot of youth without eyes on them and who have already faced all these ACEs. So oftentimes, and excuse my language, are almost low-hanging fruit. Abuse has already been very normalized. So when trafficking or another form of abuse is kind of brought into the equation, it doesn't feel wrong. Sometimes that can feel safer than a quote unquote like normal home. There can come a point where normalcy feels like an abuse and attack, and abuse feels really comfortable and like home. Um, and I will counter a little bit. I was a runaway. My first time running away was 8 years old, and I continued running away until 18. I still often say that I'm a runaway at heart. I'm always looking for somewhere new to move or do something. I just have to do it differently as an adult. But um, as a runaway, and I did meet other traffickers and was trafficked through organized crime and things like that. I was still um blamed for the things that were happening to me and ended up in juvenile justice. So I think That is part of the myth. Sometimes those trauma responses, we're still shaming and blaming the youth within foster care, and then it can follow, honestly, life throughout care, because then even when you do try and speak up about abuse that might be happening in this new foster home or abuse that might be happening in this new group home, you're often not listened to because you're just an abused foster kid. So you must be lying opposed to an investigation of these new things.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. And I think that's a great segue into our next question. But you make a great point. Like, first of all, a lot of times these kids are running away from abusive homes to begin with, right? So when they experience that trafficking or abuse, it's almost normalized. Or in some cases, they may say, well, this is better than the abuse I was experiencing at home. And then we often hear too of these kids that are running back to their trafficker after they're maybe come out of the trafficking situation. But for them, it's the only person that's ever showed them any type of love and connection or attention. So I think kind of understanding some of that trauma and so forth is very helpful. But I'd like to have Savannah answer this next question. What are some of the barriers that prevent foster youth or maybe prevented you from reporting exploitation?
Some of there's several barriers that can prevent youth from reporting, and it can vary by each person's experiences. But some of the common ones are shame, feeling loyal to their trafficker, fear of punishment, fear of placement changes. Like I had moved from group home to group home and they got worse each time. So why would I report and go somewhere that was worse than where I was already being trafficked at? Like I wanted to go back to the place I was at before that because that was the best one I was at. But there was fear that if I reported, I would be moved yet again. And then of course, fear of not being believed. When I was first taken into foster care, I had told about a time that I was raped, not a time that I was trafficked, because I felt like my mom wouldn't be in trouble because it wasn't her selling me for her drugs. And I later, years later, after I started speaking about my experiences, a lady that works for the Department of Children and Families now, she went back and pulled some of my case history, and she found that police report that I made, and the end of the conclusion was she cuts herself, she's suicidal, she's making it up. So nothing was ever looked into. But then thinking exploitation is normal. Like for me, I didn't know that it wasn't happening to other people until some of the other kids in foster care started being trafficked and they told me. Because for me, it started at an early age, and so I didn't know it wasn't normal. I was always told I couldn't talk about the things that happened at home, so I never did. But then also, when I was in foster care, I had already learned that adults either didn't notice, didn't believe me, or couldn't protect me. When that becomes your experience, reporting doesn't feel safe, it feels more risky. And so those are some of the barriers that I've experienced, and that are kind of common as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Savannah. It's really sad. I mean, it's not, I imagine there's many other youth that experience that as well. And I shared earlier in our meeting that there's a film on Netflix right now called Unbelievable. And it wasn't a trafficking situation, it was more of a serial rapist, but the same exact thing. She was, a foster youth and they basically didn't believe her. So she changed her story because it was almost easier to lie than it was to tell the truth and to be continued to be questioned and doubted and so forth. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's so important that we believe and investigate what our kids are telling us.
I
Um,
can add to that a little bit
yeah.
too. Because I think, and Savannah, and you make really good points. I can say, from my own lived experience and from working with youth within care, and making reports, a lot of times, um, one, normalization, perfect, right? Savannah, I feel like we talk about it all the time, that abuse becomes really normalized. And in my case, I was born in a domestic violence shelter, so the system had eyes on me the entire time. So every other week, it was like law enforcement or investigators coming to ask questions. And me consistently saying, even at 3, I remember being like, leave me alone, everything's fine, right? And judges are pulling me in their chambers to ask, and I'm just, everything's fine. Um, and then the couple times they did get a snippet of information from me, Savannah, similar to you, my first disclosure was sometimes my dad spits on me because to me that was the nicest thing that he did. So it would get him in the least amount of trouble. And within that investigation, I tell them this, and then I go home and I'm significantly hurt, worse than usual, because they told him what I said. Um, so, which is like our parental right that they have to know what youth are saying. But anytime a report, the abuse usually gets significantly worse. And it is reiterated once again why you're not allowed to talk to anybody. So now I've had a gun to my head. So now when you come the next day and ask me what happened, I'm back to nothing. Everything's fine. Please leave me alone. You're making things worse. um, and then when you, then by the time like you're removed and these other things, looking back, I can see now I had already learned that adults could not be trusted. So while you might be asking me these questions of what's going on in this other foster home or what's going on when I'm on the run or why I keep acting like this, I've already learned throughout my life that I can't trust you. You all make everything worse. There's no point in talking to you. Um, and then I guess that brings us back to those myths and conceptions. So then I just become the bad kid who won't listen and needs to be punished for trauma responses that I was having from the abuse I endured within my home, but also from the systems.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, and so my next question would be, what prevention strategies would be, or actually, before we get to that, before we get to prevention, let's talk a little bit about recognizing some of the signs. So, how can foster parents or caregivers or investigators distinguish between some of that typical adolescent behavior or those trauma responses and also some of the indicators of exploitation and grooming?
So when it comes to youth, and if possible, can you, when you ask the question, can you put it in the chat? So I'll be able to reflect back on it, please. When it
Will
comes to
try my
that,
best. I'm not the best multitasker, but I will
okay, thank
as
you.
well. I will do it as you're answering.
Thank you. So, the question from what I heard was about misconception. No, not misconceptions, but it was more of what are the signs of
Mhm.
youth who are being trafficked in foster care or for foster parents who are adopting the kid or just fostering. So, when it comes to that question, it really makes me think of youth who are being trafficked. Some of them. Hmm, all of them, because they're teenagers, have that instinct to do teenager things. So you have a youth who's been exploited doing teenager things. Like we know typical teenagers, they do sneak out. Let's just be real. Typical teenagers do sneak out. Typical teenagers do try to test boundaries. However, when it comes to specific HT youth, it's pushed out, it's exacerbated a little bit further. So when it comes to understanding the signs of a youth, knowing, okay, is this high risk, or is this a child who's just doing typical teenager behavior, it needs to be redirected. Sometimes it's no fine line. Sometimes when it comes to HT kids, it's both blended. It's both a teenager doing typical teenager things coupled with that exploitation, that trauma, the ACEs, everything together. But what I will say is a tall tell sign is social media. I mean, it's important for our generation to meet the youth where they are, because the way how I'm seeing trafficking nowadays for youth, it was present back then during my time, because one of my traffickers I did actually meet online. So trafficking and online and social media, to me, it is not a new concept, because it was something that was introduced during my time. But just getting with the trends of how kids are moving. So one of them could be having multiple social accounts, social media accounts, and not just one social media account that is like a trolling page. So if those of you who don't know what trolling is, it's something that the kids do when they make comments or saying things online and try to keep an anonymous presence online. So they don't really show their real face. It's some troll picture or something like that, caricature. But actually figuring out what those different social media accounts look like. Is it a private page, and does it have emojis on it that has suggestive meanings? Like one of them I've seen, a youth had two Instagram. One was her regular Instagram for everybody, and then there was the other Instagram that was for predators that were buying content from her. And she's a minor, by the way. So with that private account, it is her picture. It's an explicit picture, and that's the avatar. And then there's three little emojis. It's the water splash. It's the devil. It's the purple devil smiley face. And based off of what I just described, what are you thinking that that could be? If somebody were to see that and they don't know the child, it's like, okay, probably, an adult or whatever the case may be, but no, this is a child. And that website or that Instagram profile picture is suggesting CSAM, which is what is it? Cyber sexual abuse material, children's
Child
sexual
sexual
abuse
abuse
material,
material.
child
Yes.
yeah, child
Mhm.
sexual abuse material. And I'll put those acronyms in the chat too if I'm able. Um, but that's one of them, is knowing what's going on in their social media life. Who are they connected to? What are their movements? If they're sneaking out, how long are they sneaking out? Who's showing up? What type of vehicle? So it really takes the parent, one, being educated as to and being able to decipher what is the two. Is this trafficking? Is there multiple vehicles showing up? Or is she always leaving? Or when she comes back, does she come back with an STD? Does he come back with an STD? Right? I've mentored some youth who were boys and verified as human trafficked, and when they would come back, always with a different STD. At 12 years old, gonorrhea, chlamydia, come on. We have to really think about those things. That's not common for a child, but it's common for a child who is human traffic verified. It's common for us. So just being able to know what is actual teenage behavior and redirection and education, and what is actually trafficking. So that's one of them, social media, the different social media pages. Who's picking them up? How long are they gone for? When they come back, do they come back with an STD? Do they come back with tattoos that are unexplainable? Do they come back with money, clothes? Do they come back do they have substances? Because not all the time is it money, clothes, and food. Sometimes it's drugs. How are they getting the means to get those drugs?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Lisa, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, no, Daniela, that was all great. I am a geriatric millennial, so I often say with trafficking, exploitation is a business at the end of the day, and online has allowed them to expand their business model, if you will. A trafficker can sit. in from the comfort of his couch now and just a million kids at once. You can hit up about 200 youth at once on social media. They tend to prey the ones that maybe are posting pictures that I don't want to, they a 13-year-old should be allowed to wear a bathing suit, right? But we have to be mindful when we're doing it online what other people might look at that like. Um, and traffickers often, when youth post on their stories, fighting with mom or dad or blah, blah, all those things, now they are vulnerable. So yes, watching your youths online. I think also we should kind of ask ourselves, though, like as the adults and caregivers in our lives, if we're looking at a youth and instead of thinking like this is typical adolescent behavior, if your brain starts thinking like they're fast and they just won't listen or they have to do those things, maybe check in with your own biases and there might be more to the story than a youth just not listening to you or doing what we consider appropriate behaviors. Again, Daniela, your friends, definitely keep an eye on those peers, keep an eye on age appropriate relationships. These are not 14-year-olds trafficking other 14-year-olds. So I think that's another way to look. I know for me, my lived experience was my trauma responses were very similar to Savannah. I was a cutter, I was a runner, and I was extremely violent. And drugs. But I also grew up with other foster youth and have known other people throughout my life that their trauma response was the complete opposite end, right? And they got very quiet. They withdrew. They were sleeping in class, things of that. So I think whenever looking at youth, since trauma responses are can go from anyway if we as the adult are thinking that this behavior isn't what we want or think of it in a negative way, then there's probably more to the story.
Thank you so much. And we hear a lot of those same common factors, not only with foster youth, but just our youth in general, right? The social media, changes in behavior, and so forth. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'd like to now move into a little bit about prevention. What are some of the prevention strategies that are most effective for youth in foster care? Who would like to take that first?
I believe when it comes to prevention and intervention both go hand in hand. Um, we talked about earlier the vulnerabilities, right? Like youth are being removed from vulnerable, traumatic, and exploitive environments already. And so then when you remove them from a traumatic environment and place them in another environment where I don't know these people, um, these are not my family, like what is this? Can you imagine being uprooted? And then the state's eyes or system's eyes may see, well, we're trying to protect you and we're trying to help you. But when you remove me, put me in this system and now expect for me to be docile and to just follow whatever it is that you're asking, that's not the case. So from the moment a child is removed from a home, their home, and placed into care, prevention and intervention really need to be at the front door. It needs to be like right there, holding them hand in hand and really giving these youth education and understanding as to what's going on, and creating a safe space. A child's response to systems is based off of what does that setting look like? Is it trauma informed? Like if you're bringing a child into a space, what does it look like? I've heard from some of my clients that I've worked with when they were removed from a home, they went to a I I think it was a shelter. I don't think it was a shelter, but that's what it's being called. But kids are sleeping on the floor. So you're removing me from my place, and who's to say I probably was sleeping on the floor there, but it's a place that I know, putting me somewhere here, and I'm supposed to be waiting here, and it looks like an office. It's not an office, but it looks like an office, and now I'm sleeping on the floor, and now I'm dealing with the staff who's rude to me, who treats me and sees me as every other kid that walks through here. Of course, I am going to have a traumatic response. Of course, you're going to see resistancy. You're going to see me not wanting to comply because what setting did you place in front of me? You know, kids who have gone through the ACEs, who've gone through trauma, there's this, it's unfortunate, but I call it a superpower that we get when we know that this is not a safe space for me, when we know that there's more harm here. So again, when you take that child, bring them to that shelter, um, and typically majority of the kids that I have supported have told me the same consistent story. And sometimes these kids don't even know each other, but they tell me the same consistent story. I'm removed, I'm brought here, and I've been sleeping on the floor waiting for a shelter or a foster to open up for me. I don't want to be here. I'm going to run away. This is not a trauma-informed setting for me. This is not a safe space for me. So it is imperative from the moment, I'll say from the beginning, the strategy that systems can work on differently is when that child is removed, when they step foot into wherever they're going, what does it symbolize for them? How are they treated? Is it trauma informed care? How are you talking to me? Are you asking me, do I want something to eat? That's something that I always say to my kiddos when I first meet them. Let's get something to eat. And it's like they light up. They're like, okay, we can eat, like we getting food for our first session. What are you doing to show that you are trusted in the beginning? What education, what communication? And so the prevention and intervention starts right there. You got 5 seconds or five minutes to leave an impression. What will that impression be left on that child coming into care? Yes, Lisa, building rapport.
Yeah, so Lisa, would you like to piggyback on that? You put in the chat building rapport. Can you want to expand a little bit on more of that? We talked about, yeah, offering them something to eat. Who doesn't like, especially kids, want something to eat?
Well, that's my first go-to too, Daniela. What kind of food do you like? It's a good opener. Uh, No, Daniela nailed it. Absolutely. Building that rapport, whether justice system youth or youth across the board. If you are looking to build a relationship with youth, you need to build that rapport and you need to also be authentic. Children can smell inauthenticity, and teenagers, it can smell it even more. If you say you're going to do something, absolutely follow through. If you say you're going to bring a pencil, you better bring that pencil next time you see them. Um, I think when we're discussing prevention, we really need to talk about like across not just foster youth and juvenile youth, we need better education of what abuse is across the board when we talk about preventing SA, so sexual assault or DV. I feel like we put entirely too much emphasis or expect children to know what abuse is and what's happening to them. I don't have language to tell you what's happening to me. I know it doesn't feel good in my body and something's wrong, but this is also my family, right? I don't have the language. So when we talk prevention work, it really is about education from that day one, teaching children what their own bodies is. There is a way to do this in an age appropriate manner for every age. When I was raising my kids, they immediately, of course, because of my lived experience, if you ask my kids as adults, I was psychotically overboard and protective of like, no sleepovers, no thanks, right? Um, but it was important. They knew immediately this is your body. These are unhealthy questions. If somebody asks you to keep secret, right? Like this is you come tell your trusted person. When we're talking intervention, I know when I work intervention, or maybe direct service with somebody who or a youth that is still engaged in the life, I'm not talking about trafficking. We're talking about healthy relationships. What do healthy relationships look like? Um, and then they automatically, not automatically, with time and building that rapport, and you start educating on what a healthy relationship is and what abuse is, they start putting two and two together. Like, hey, my person does those unhealthy things, and you just kind of walk them through that. Wow, what would it look like if it was healthy? How would that be? So intervention definitely looks a little bit different when I approach, because it's really it's a really personal, like, experience to realize that you've been abused. Um, and not only realize that you've been abused, to realize that somebody you loved, whether it be your parent or your partner, was that abusive person. Um, and that can carry its own sadness, if you will, when you're coming to that realization. So intervention can look different. And then prevention, I think we can, as a human civilization, get really better at. How do we support families? How do we support communities? Um, how do we prevent the vulnerabilities that often lead to trafficking, and that poverty, lack of education, substance use are all big factors. Um, in sexual abuse and childhood abuse.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Those are all great suggestions. And I know we have just a little under 15 minutes left. I do want to get to the Q&A from our audience, but I do want to wrap up with just a couple questions real quick. One, I know during our discussion we mentioned, and this was kind of mind-blowing to me. So you've got these kids coming in with all this trauma, right? And putting them into another traumatic type situation. And I think it was mentioned that they're not receiving counseling. Is that correct? To deal with that trauma in the first place. And 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 then what resources are needed for these kids? What does an ideal system, foster care system, look like? So if we can just take a couple minutes and go around and answer that, that would be great. I know, what's an ideal foster care system in 2 minutes? Go. Who would like to take the lead on that one? Daniela?
Okay, I will take lead. So you said the question is, what is the ideal foster care system?
Yeah. And then I do want to also touch on what are also for the kids aging out of the foster care system, some of those, what is needed for them as well. So it's kind of a two for one, but
Okay, so what are life skills or resources should youth receive before transitioning out of care? I believe the moment that the youth enters into care, and yes, they do have a case manager, but oftentimes I have heard from youth that I have supported. Again, the youth that I support, I don't say work with, I say support, they are my teachers. So they're the ones who let me know what it looks like for them. And not in a retaliatory way, but more of a conversation for me to see their life from their perspective. And also, my own understanding and own research and just being a professional in the field. The moment the youth gets into foster care, I do know that they have a case manager, but there needs to be more preparation as to how would their life look like aging out. So from the moment that they're in care, preparation needs to be focused on, okay, if you got in at the age of 13, and of course we don't know what life will look like in the next 2, 3, 5 years. We don't know if this youth will get adopted, will have a foster parent. We don't know, but we can only assume that if they get in at the age of in their teens or preteens, there's a good assumption that they will stay there. That's a good assumption. Is that right, Lisa? Or is that right, Savannah? Do you all feel otherwise?
Repeat that last sentence.
The sentence, or it was the question, When a
Yeah.
youth gets into foster care as a preteen or a preteen or a teen, the likelihood of them getting adopted, how vast is that? Like how common it is for them to get adopted at an age like that?
Well, one, I have a lot of issues with adoption. So one, I should be honest, not disclose my foster care experience was in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, foster care is very different from Florida foster care. I have learned through working in Florida with foster youth. I am against adoption, but to your question, a teenager is not likely to be adopted. And oftentimes, if they do end up adopted, they miss out on a lot of their services they would receive if they stayed aged out. And what I see, and again, this is Florida, Massachusetts does not push adoption. Termination of rights is very difficult. You can be a ward of the state without terminating the parents' rights in Massachusetts. So what I have found with the majority of the youth that I worked with in Florida when they are adopted, they don't have a lot of recourse when the abuse starts coming from the adopted parents, and many times they are kicked out at 18. And left on their own because now they said we adopted you, you've been problematic, you're trauma. So I feel like that is a group we are absolutely failing. And from I like to listen to adoption advocates with lived experience, and that's where I get a lot of uh the stats and information from, and they have me fully on board to be anti-adopted adoption now. So I feel
Thank
like
you.
we do not have enough time in this webinar for me to go
We,
on and on.
we don't,
Yeah.
but you answered my question, which my question was, if you
Yes,
have a
it's not
youth,
going to happen as a teen. People want
it's
babies.
they
Yeah,
want
and
babies.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that because that's what I
yeah,
wanted to say, but I'm like,
yeah,
but no, people want babies.
yeah.
So
Right.
the likelihood of this tween, preteen getting into foster care, there's a less likelihood of them getting adopted. So from the moment that they get in, provide that education awareness of what it will look like in foster care. What is the limitations of a case manager? And this is not a one-time conversation. This needs to be a consistent conversation. And yes, they may get annoyed. You tell me the same thing over and over. Well, I'm telling you the same thing over and over because I want you to have that education and awareness and understanding. So from the moment they get into foster care, there needs to be someone guiding them through the process. Sometimes it's a case manager, but the case manager has 20 plus kids. So it's a system that is larger, and it's how do we really protect kids? And one way that we don't protect kids is putting one case manager with 20 kids. That is not how we're protecting kids. So, in my idea of what ideal foster care would look like, a case manager that can really provide that one-on-one intense care that they need, because the case manager is the legal guardian, right? A legal guardian cannot supervise and take care of 20 to 25 kids. So let's make it realistic. Let's have it where it's a case manager really does have the time to sit there and be there with that child throughout their experience in foster care. So that's for me, that's one thing I would like to change, or that would be the ideal portion of foster care, is really kids getting that care and
Yeah.
not
Thank you so
exhausting the
much.
case
And
manager. Mhm.
yeah, and it comes right down to funding, right? Once again. Savannah, I'd like you to, if you can, and we have about 5 minutes left, and I do want to get to the questions, but Savannah, can you just share briefly with us what an ideal system would look like for you or for
An
foster youth?
ideal prevention system.
Yeah, or even just an ideal foster care system for our youth as well.
Okay. Um, I guess an ideal foster care system for youth would be um probably not, maybe group homes, but not as large. Like I know the place where I was, there was anywhere up to 15 of us in like a building. Um, And I like since then I'm still connected with some of the people from like that work there. And one of the my case manager from there, one of the things that she says is that she didn't think about then because she was of course young and just out of college, is that it's an ideal place for a perpetrator who hasn't been caught. And so they can pass a background check. But all of these places, like the staff are paid a low salary, and so you just get somebody who to fill a position because they're always short staffed, and so there needs to be a place with people who actually care. Because until that happens, the youth in foster care are not going to have the care that they need and the care that they deserve after what they've experienced before they got there. Um, but counseling, mentoring, I always encourage people to mentor foster youth, because one safe adult can change everything. Um, but then, like an ideal prevention system would be that everybody, teachers, doctors, churches, coaches, everybody is informed of trauma, understands trauma and trafficking and abuse, knows the warning signs, and children don't have to disclose 10 different times before somebody acts.
Thank you so much. Okay, so last thing, one sentence. One sentence if you can. What is something, one takeaway that you want our audience to have, or one thing that you think communities can do to support or prevent human trafficking in the foster care systems? Savannah, do you want to go first?
Um, I would, sorry, I honestly don't remember the question.
That's okay. So just one takeaway or one thing, action step, someone can do regarding this issue.
I would say be that caring adult for a child, whether it's in foster care or a neighbor or somebody, be that safe person because every child can use all the support they can get.
Thank you. And Lisa?
Same, more if you are interested in being more involved with foster youth, definitely volunteer, whatever that looks like. They need safe adults. When we're talking about the system, we need to offer more counseling. They need GED services, career training. Just there needs to be a lot more opportunities for what it looks like for when they age out. A lot of people forget that these youth will have system burnout and social workers and the system itself kind of does have a revolving door, right? Not the pay, the stuff like that. So if we can get one person that is outside of the system to build the rapport with, we have better results.
Daniela?
I would say, I'm gonna say something that Lisa had said in her way, but I'm gonna transcribe it in my way. Don't tell HT kids, do not tell kids who are verified as human traffic, who are in delinquency, dependency, any type of system that they are HT kid. Don't tell them that. I've heard it that some kids who are in dependency, they're being told by staff that you're a human trafficked child or you're a human trafficked kid or they're pimping you. That is not trauma informed and that is not a best practice. The,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, so it sounds like the takeaways, definitely caring adults, volunteer, what is that, case managers, volunteers, a trusted adult is so important. Building those relationships with our youth is so important. So we are right at time, but I want to do this one question real quick. What percentage of youth in the foster system are actually trafficked and abused? Does anyone know what the percentage is? I know statistics vary depending on
If we
who's
look at
reporting.
national statistics, it's about 65%. When you start to zero in on certain things, like if we looked at New York within the juvenile justice system, I think some of their numbers were 75%. But if we look at national numbers, it's about 65 to 70% of youth within foster care have experienced exploitation.
Okay, yeah, and then their question, it was at the beginning, was why does this happen? I think we kind of covered that. The other thing, someone was asking about resources to understand on social media what they're looking for. I know we do a presentation for parents and caregivers that kind of go over some of these emojis and so forth that Daniela mentioned. But if any of you have any resources you'd like me to share with our audience, if you could send those to me either by tomorrow, that I can include it in the follow-up email to our audience, that would be great. Otherwise, we also have, some resources on our website, or you can also check out, I can share some resources as well of the follow-up as well. But thank you all, ladies, for sharing all your information today, for educating us, and for creating an awareness about some of the unfortunate things that we see in the foster care system, but also some ways that we can take action, some ways that we can protect our children and engage with them a little bit more. So thanks again. Yes, the emojis are always changing. It's so hard to keep up with what's happening with social media, but have a great day, everyone. And thank you for joining us today. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.